Hey everyone, welcome back to another GeoGuessr tips video. And in this video I'll be giving tips and tricks on how you can region guess specific areas within some countries using languages. So this video is going to be quite Europe heavy because that's where some of the most linguistically diverse areas in GeoGuessr are, and a few things in South Asia as well. So let's start in Europe. Let's start with UK, and the first tip I have is for recognizing the northwest of Scotland using the Scottish Gaelic language. So Scottish Gaelic is belongs to the Celtic language family, and you can see some examples here in the dark green. So it's a very different looking language to English. You can generally recognize it by a lot of combinations like MH, TH, BH. Yeah, a lot of H's, and a lot of these accents above the letters like the A and the O, mostly in the Outer Hebrides or the northwestern fringes of Scotland. So yeah, the next tip, we'll go further south, and we have in northern England you tend to see certain suffixes come up more often, like this toft and this thorp suffix. So these are some areas that are influenced by the Vikings from Scandinavia, and actually I found a few maps with a bunch of endings that you generally tend to see in this area of England. Also more towards East Anglia as well, you tend to see some of these endings, so I will show you here. So we have the by, the kirk, the nest, thorpe, thwaite, toft, and also holm. So yeah, I think the by, the toft, the thorpe, and the thwaite are probably the most useful ones to remember here. So if you see these kind of endings, you generally want to guess in the north and the eastern areas of England. Be careful because there are exceptions as well. As you can see here, there's some BYs in like Northern Ireland and Southern England, but yeah, as a general rule of thumb, you might be in the north and the northeast of England if you see those endings. Going further south, we have Cornwall, which is a county in the far southwest of England, and it's not spoken so much nowadays, but it does have its own language, Cornish, which is another Celtic language, and sometimes you can recognize it in some place names. Here we have Gweek, and here we have, I think, Roskinwin, which are very Cornish sounding names. And it tends to sound a bit like Welsh, but also a bit different. You have a lot of endings like Porth Tawan, that sounds very Cornish. You have like this Eric ending sometimes. You have a lot more K's as well. So yeah, once you get the vibe of what the Cornish language looks like, then yeah, it can help to guess in this area if you see some place names that sound Cornish. So yeah, moving on, let's move on to France, and we have a similar language, which is the Breton language, which also belongs to the Celtic language family. It's spoken in this very far western peninsula of France, and here we have some examples of French on the top and Breton on the bottom of some place names. So yeah, it just generally sounds very different to French. You have sometimes you have this IOU with the accent ending. Sometimes you have a lot more K's. And yeah, like this Curluan sounds very Breton. This Pludalmizu, forgive my pronunciation, some of these endings just sound very Breton. Moving on to France, more inland in France, we have here in the northern parts of France, you tend to see certain suffixes like ville, and the other one on this image is court. So if you see a ville or a court, you are generally in the north and northeast of France. There will be some exceptions, of course, but as a general rule of thumb, you might be in that area. And further south, we have the ac ending, the AC, and you find this ending generally in the central to southwestern parts of France, around where my cursor is, and you also see it a little bit in Brittany. But yeah, this ac ending is common in those areas of France. And then further west, you have some German-sounding names in Alsace near the German border, like Heim, I think is a very common one, Heim. If you see that, you're probably very close to the German border. Um, yeah, I'll link a Reddit post as well that has a map showing some of the tendencies of these suffixes in France. Moving further south into Spain, we have the Basque country, which is home to a very unique language, the Basque language. And here's an example of a signage. We have a Zalmanac Ezk. You can see it just doesn't look Spanish at all. You have a lot more K's, a lot more Z's, a lot more kind of TZ. So yeah, you'll often see a lot of signs in this area of Spain, and sometimes in the south, very far southwest of France as well. I forgot to show this map shows some regional languages of Spain. So this is the Basque country that we just covered. And the next language I want to talk about is the Catalan language, which is spoken in this Catalan region of France. It's also spoken in the Balearic Islands and Valencian further south, which I think is just a dialect of Catalan. So I'll show you some examples of Catalan language. This is a language. This is a Latin language, so it is a lot more similar to Spanish than the Basque language sounds. But here we have some examples of complements with the T. You have a lot more words kind of ending in T, ending in consonants you won't typically see in Spanish. Like I've seen temps as well, TMPS. Like I think it means time in Catalan, which just doesn't sound like a very Spanish word. And like sometimes you see these accents, I think they're the graph accents, they are pointing towards the left instead of the typical Spanish accents that point towards the right. So yeah, if you see a lot of these accents, then yeah, you might be in the Catalan area of France. I think maybe some more words ending in U as well. Yeah, but this is quite a good one. You will probably come across Catalan a lot. It's used a lot around Barcelona, Valencia, and the Balearic Islands. Okay, so the final one I want to talk about in Spain is a Galician language, which is very similar to Portuguese, I believe. You won't see this so much, but it does help for the street name signs. I forgot to mention in Catalan, you also see carrer instead of calle for street names in this area. So here we have the carrer, means street in Catalan. But in Galicia, in the far northwest, you will often see rua, R-U-A with the accent on the U. If you see a rua as a street name, you're probably in the Galician part of Spain. So yeah, that covers Spain. I want to quickly talk about Netherlands, because Netherlands has a Frisian language in the far north that sounds very different to. It sounds quite different to Dutch. So yeah, generally again, this helps more with place names. You might see a lot more chevrons on some of the letters, like the A, you have the chevron. I think the U sometimes as well. Like this Noordboogum, the OA. Sounds quite different to normal Dutch. And the UM ending I found tends to come up a lot in the northern parts of the Netherlands. So yeah, if you see the Frisian sounding names or like the UM ending, then yeah, you might be in the northern part of the Netherlands. Moving on, let's have a look at Switzerland. So obviously French, Spanish, and Italian are the most well-known languages spoken in Switzerland, but there's also a lesser-known language called Romansh, which is spoken in the province of Graubünden, this province in the southeastern corner. It's a Romance language, so it's more similar to Italian than it is to German. But it looks a bit different. It's got like this Punt de Rhein is an example of Romansh with the Vidk. It sounds very Romansh. You might see a lot more like SCH combination together like you do in German, which is which you can distinguish from French and Italian. So yeah, Station. I think the like IUN Zion ending is quite Romansh sounding. So yeah, if you get a feel for this language, then that's a good clue for the Graubünden area of southeastern Switzerland. Moving on to Italy. Italy, in the far north of Italy, in the province of South Tyrol, or in German Südtirol, which is this area just south of Austria, speaks German. So if you see a lot of German signs or bilingual German-Italian signs like this Freifruit in German and then the Italian, then you're probably in this Südtirol area generally around Bolzano. Not really in the not really in the eastern part here, but more south of Innsbruck, around Bolzano and north of Bolzano. So yeah, if you see a lot of that language, you might be in this part of Italy. Also, on that note, I think in Ulster you see some French language at times. Yeah, like this Chatillon, more French, and sometimes you will see some Slovenian close to the Slovenia border. So yeah, moving on to Croatia, we have this peninsula in Croatia, Istria. If you see some Italian and you think it's Croatia, then you might be in this Istrian peninsula. So here's an example here in this image. We have this La Strada del Vino, the Italian, on the sign, and Trattoria, I think is Italian, is Giorgio. Moving on to Poland, we have this map by Atlas Polski, which shows some patterns in place name suffixes in Poland. So the two most useful ones, I would say, is this OW and this OWO. So if you see the OVO ending, you are most likely in the northern half of Poland, and if you see the OV ending, then you are most likely in the southern half of Poland. I feel like this comes up quite a lot, so a very, very useful one to know. And if you also want to learn some of the other ones, the EVO might be quite useful, and the IV ending, the INO. These are some good patterns. But also, again, be careful because there might be some exceptions. For example, OVO, you can see there are a few towns in the south, and OW, you can see there are a few in the north. So this is an example with the southern Poland with the OW ending, and this is an example in northern Poland. We have a place name with the OWO ending. So let's move on to Romania, and so obviously the main language is Romanian, but there's also a lot of Hungarian spoken in parts of Romania, and specifically in this area of Romania, north of Brasov, in I think the Harghita and the Covasna counties, and sometimes around Târgu Mureș and near the northwestern Hungarian border, you will see Hungarian language. So this is an example. I've seen it bait a lot of people in GeoGuessr. So yeah, this Hungarian language. But be careful because you could be in Romania if you see this language, this Hungarian language. It can be really helpful if you know it because it can help you to not only know that it's Romania, but also to maybe guess this specific region of Romania. So let's move on and talk about Scandinavia. And in the far north of Scandinavia, you sometimes have they sometimes use the Sami language, which is spoken in the northern parts of Norway, Sweden and Finland. I feel like you see it most often in Norway. You can just recognize it because it looks very, very different to Norwegian or any Scandinavian language. You have the some of these accents on the letters, and yeah, it just looks very, very different. These accents you don't get in Norwegian. So yeah, if you see this very interesting Sami language, you might be in the far north of Norway, or possibly northern Sweden and Finland as well. Yeah, moving on now to Sweden. Sweden, you can also guess regions using place name suffixes. I'll show a couple of maps with the most useful ones to learn, and thank you to Mackem for providing these maps and letting me use them in the video. So here we have the star, stad and stede ending. So if you see the star, you'll be more likely to be in the northern or central parts of Sweden. If you see stud, you'll be likely to be in the south, and if you see the stede ending, you might be in the island of Gotland. And another map here you can see with the Rud, Red, Rud, Reed. So the Rud is this area near Norway. Rud will be one of these two areas. Reed, there'll be this area, and Red, you'll be this area on the west coast. Again, be careful of exceptions. So, for example, Red, you can see a few red dots further east as well. So yeah, sometimes sometimes you need to take it with a grain of salt, but yeah, it can help you to guess some specific regions. I'll also link a Wikipedia article if you want to learn more Swedish suffixes that can help you guess the region. But yeah, I think learning these can be really, really useful in GeoGuessr. So I have an example here in Sweden. We have the red ending, and we have another red ending here. So we've got two endings like this, so we can probably generally, with fairly good confidence, guess that we might be in this area near Göteborg based on the place name suffix. So yeah, moving on to Finland. In Finland, some areas, I think in the western coast and southern coast, you will see some Swedish spoken. So here's an example of Swedish here on the west coast of Finland. We have this coarseness and this vegan. It's very good to know vegan is a Swedish ending on street signs, as opposed to the TIE you tend to get in Finnish. So you can see here the blue are the areas where Swedish is spoken. So you can see in the central west coast here, the south coast, and also around the Åland Islands, you'll see a lot of Swedish. So moving on to Russia. Russia, you also have a lot of regional languages, and the first tip is for this Karelia area, east of Finland, which uses a language. Karelian languages sound very, very similar to Finnish. So if you can read Cyrillic and you can make out some of the names like this, Suojärvi, you can see that it sounds almost Finnish. So if you see a lot of names that sound quite similar to Finnish, but in the Cyrillic language, then there's a chance that you might be in these areas of Karelia near the Finland border. Moving towards central Russia. In central Russia, you have many republics which have their own ethnic groups and languages. So the first one is the Tatar language spoken in this republic, Tatarstan, around Kazan. The second one is the Bashkir language, which is spoken in Bashkortostan, which is this province around Ufa. And then the last one is the Mari language, which is spoken around Yoshkar Ola. So as you can see here, we have very different languages to Russian. We have this letter here and this letter in Tatar. We have some different letters in the Bashkir language, this Z and this K, and some of these letters here are also very different to Russian. And in Mari language, here we just have like a bilingual street sign with the Russian on the top, and the Mari language at the bottom with the Urem, which means street in the Mari language. And street names can be a good way to recognize these areas if you see them. So yeah, here you can see that street is very similar in all three languages, Uram or Urem or something on those lines. So if you see these words on a street sign, or even an abbreviation like just the UR alongside Ulica, which is street in Russian, then you might be in one of these three republics. And it also helps maybe to know some of the letters that you see in these languages. This is the Bashkir language. You have a letter down here and some of these letters up here. And in the Mari language, you see more of these two dots above some of the vowels. And in the Tatar language, you have the I think it's the sound, and then this upside down e, and some of these little dashes as well under the letters are unique in these languages. So moving on to the Caucasus region of Russia. Now the Caucasus is home to so many different languages, but in general, if you see more Middle Eastern influence or Middle Eastern sounding words, then you might be in this Caucasus region. So here, for example, you can see the shawarma, which comes from shawarma, which is a very common Middle Eastern influenced dish. And you can also maybe pick out some words, maybe even in Latin. I think there's an example here. Yeah, there's an example here, Bismillah, which has a lot more Middle Eastern influence. And you can also see generally the way the place names sound. You have a lot more like root endings, I find, in the south. And some of these names like Dulum or like Shali, Urus Martan just sound very Middle Eastern sounding, as opposed to what you'd get around like generic parts of Russia. So yeah, that can help you recognize the South Caucasus region sometimes. Moving away from Europe, and we're going to look at India and Sri Lanka. And what you might not know is that Sri Lanka has two languages, Sinhala and Tamil. So here you can see the areas where Tamil is spoken in the north parts and the eastern parts, and then the rest of the country you see the Sinhala language spoken. So I'll also show you two examples of Sinhala and Tamil in GeoGuessr that can maybe help you distinguish the two. So Sinhala, as you can see, you have a lot more generally curved, rounded characters in the language, whereas here in Tamil, which is spoken in the north and the east, you see it just looks a little bit different. You have these a lot more straight kind of edges in some of the letters, and you have these dots. It just looks a little bit different. You can see some examples over here in India with the Tamil language, a lot more straight characters, and in Sri Lanka, yeah, a lot more curved characters. Yeah, so this is a map showing the different scripts of India. So as you can see, the main one is the Devangari script, which is spoken in the north and central parts, especially around Delhi, Mumbai, and also around like Uttar Pradesh, Varanasi, these areas. So Punjabi is also very similar, and Bengali are also very similar as in the sense that they have going the bar going above the text, which you don't get in the south. So I'll show you an example. So yeah, on this map you can see the bar going above the text in the North Indian place names. And the second script I want to talk about is the Gujarati script, which kind of looks similar to the North Indian scripts, but you don't have the bar or the stroke going across the letters. So yeah, this is an example of the Gujarati script. So if you see a script that looks like this, you will be in the Gujarat region of India. And then further south, you have a lot more scripts with a lot more like rounded or curved characters, a lot more similar to Sri Lanka. So in the states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, you have the Telugu script. So this is an example of Telugu, and in around Karnataka, the state of Karnataka, you have the Kannada script, and then around Tamil Nadu, which is around Chennai and south of Chennai, you have the Tamil script, which has a lot more of these straight letters than you see in the other scripts in southern India. So that will be it for this video. So I hope you learned something new, and I hope that these tips come in useful in a future GeoGuessr game. I'll be putting the links to the maps in the description below for reference if you want to check out them again. And yeah, thank you everyone for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.